We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Gimel Amud Beis Meseches Avodah Zara. This is Avodah Zarah Daf 53b. On the previous Amud, the Gemara brought a brisa with various scenarios in which it seems that maybe the Ovid Kochavim was in fact mevatel his Avodah Zara, but the brisa here continues, Imasidin lachzor, but if in the future they're going to return, Kimilchemes Yehoshua, like by the war of Yehoshua, meaning to say essentially these non-Jews, these Ovdei Kochavim are thinking of taking back or getting back that Avodah Zara, so Eina B'Teila, so then it's not nullified. And the Gemara later on will ask, what exactly are we referencing Milchemes Yehoshua over here? Rashi explains, Kimilchemes Yehoshua lekame parach. Later on the Gemara will ask, Halo Hador Amorim sheyatzu leilachim im Yehoshua. The Amori who fought with Yehoshua, they did not return. So what exactly does it mean over here that if in the future they would return, like the Milchemes Yehoshua? But in any case, the Gemara continues with Tzricha. Now it's necessary to teach all of the various cases listed in the Brisa, and now the Gemara will list the cases. The Itana Lava Alel, let's say the Tana, the Brisa, only had the case of borrowing against the Avodah Zara. That's when the Ovid Kochavim borrows money, and he makes the Avodah Zara a pledge, a collateral for that loan. So if we only had that case, Midalo Zavna, from the fact that he didn't sell it, so Lo Batla, that indicates that he wasn't really nullifying it. In other words, if he needed the money, he could have sold the Avodah Zara. He didn't want to sell it. Instead, he just made it a pledge on some money that he borrowed. So there already it's logical to say that he did not nullify it. Aval nafla alem apolis, but if a bunch of stones fell upon it, midalo kamafanila, from the fact that he makes no efforts to clear the stones, ema bitule batzla, one might think that he did nullify. So tzricha, that's why it's necessary to teach that case. Vitana nafla alem apolis, and if the Tana only brought the case of the stones falling upon it, mishum desavar, because there the Ovid Kochavim thinks to himself, hamanaches kolemes devayin lo shakil nala, it's placed, it's somewhere under those stones, and whenever I want it, I'll be able to take it. But the Gemara says, Aval Ganvua listim, but if it's stolen by robbers, Midolo Kamahader Abasra, from the fact that he's not pursuing it at all, he's not trying to get back the Avodah Zara at all, Bitule Batla, that shows that in that case, maybe he didn't nullify it, so Tzricha, so we need that case as well to say that's also not a nullification. Vitana Ganvua listim, and if we had the case of being stolen by robbers, Mishum Desavar, because there he thinks to himself, Iovid Kochavim Shakala, Miflach Palachla, if an Ovid Kochavim, if it's an idolater who's the one that stole it, so he'll worship it. And Yisrael Shaklan, if it was a Jewish person who took it, who stole it, Aidi Didamah Yukarin, since it's very expensive, Mizavin Lolo Ovid Kochavim, he's going to sell it to another idol worshiper, Ufalachla, and he'll worship it. And so therefore, those are reasons why one might say that it's not batal. Aval Hinichua Habailim V'holchu L'Medina Sayam, but if the owners leave their idols and they just go L'Medina Sayam overseas, Midalo Shaklu Bahadaya, from the fact that they didn't take it with them, Bitule Bitzlua, we might say over there that they did nullify. So Tzricha, that's why it's necessary to teach all of these cases to say that none of these actions represent a nullification of the Avodah Zara. And the Gemara continues, the way that the Brisa phrased it was that if the non-Jew is intending on returning like by the war of Yehoshua, so then it's not nullified, because again the idea is that really the Ovid Kochavim, the idolater, is intending to get back that idol, to get back that Avodah Zara. But the Gemara asks, Midi Milchemes Yehoshua Mahader Hadar, in the war of Yehoshua, did the Amori actually return? The Gemara says, no, Hachi Kamar, this is what it means to say. Imasidin Lachzer, if in the future they'd return, Harehu Kimilchemes Yehoshua, it's like the war of Yehoshua, Ve'ein la B'Teila, and then it's not going to be considered to be nullified. And Rashi explains, Hachi Kamar, this is what we mean to say, Masidin Lachzor, if again the owners are planning on returning, Harehi Asura, so then the Avodah Zara is also if they're planning on getting back that Avodah Zara. Ka'osa Avodas Kochavim Shel Amorim, and the Brisa is saying it's similar to the idols of the Amori, Sheyazul Melchama, because they went out to war, V'dimu Lachzor, and in their minds they thought they would return. Lafikach Nesra Avodas Kochavim Shelahem Bahana, that's why their Avodah Zara is Asur Bahana, we're not allowed to derive benefit from that Avodah Zara. Tachsiv, as it's written in the Pasuk, Lo anything that was taken, anything from that war that was taken, that was Avodah Zara, you can't get any benefit. Because the Amori, they never nullified it knowingly when they went out to war. And the Gemara continues, but why do we even have to state in the Brisa that this is somewhat similar to the war by Yehoshua? Why even bring in the war by Yehoshua? And to that the Gemara says, Milsa agavurcha kamashmal, and the Brisa is teaching us something else along the way. It's like Rav Yehuda said that Rav said, the same basic idea in the following halacha. Yisrael shezakaf leveinu l'shtachavosla. Let's say a Jew stands up a brick in order to bow to it, and then an idolater comes, a non-Jew comes, and bows to the brick. So the halach is asra, the halach is that it becomes prohibited. Now normally you're not able to prohibit something that doesn't belong to you. If an Oved Kochavim would bow to a brick of a Jew, that doesn't make the brick prohibited because he doesn't own it. But in this case, by standing it up, he's showing that he wants it to be worshipped, and therefore essentially the Oved Kochavim is almost acting like his agent, acting like his shliach, and therefore it does become prohibited. And the Gemara says, Min nolan d'asra. From where do we know that in this case it's prohibited, by this case of the brick? Amar Rebbe Lazar says, Kitchila shel Eretz Yisrael. It's just like in the beginning of the founding, so to speak, of Eretz Yisrael, when they conquered Eretz Yisrael. It's the same idea. That's why we're bringing in Milchemes Yehoshua, because this idea is similar to Tchila shel Eretz Yisrael. The Amar Rachmana, because the pasuk says, V'asher reim tisrafon beish. You have to burn their Asherah trees in fire. So Michli, let us see. We can ask the same question over here. Yerusha hi lahem me'avoseim. Eretz Yisrael is an inheritance from their fathers. It was promised to Avram Avinu. So really we should say, Ve'en adam oser davar she'eino shelo. A person's not able to prohibit something that doesn't belong to him. The same way that really the Oved Kochavim shouldn't be able to make the brick prohibited because he's not the owner. So to Eretz Yisrael, the trees in Eretz Yisrael, they shouldn't be prohibited because it's a Yerusha to the Bnei Yisrael. V'imi sham hanach demeikar. Now, if you're going to say it's because of the ones that were there even earlier than it was promised to Avram Avinu, but bivitula bi'alma sagilu, so wouldn't bittul be enough? Just have it that those are nullified by the Oved Kochavim. Elo, rather, the answer is mida polchu Yisrael egel. From the fact that Klal Yisrael bowed to the egel hazav, golu adatayu denichaluhu ba'avodas kochavim. At that moment, they showed that it was pleasing to them, the idea of Avoda Zara. V'chiyasu ovdei kochavim shlichusa didhu avdi. And when the ovdei kochavim in Eretz Yisrael, when they went ahead, and they bowed to the Asherah trees, they worshipped the Asherah trees, they essentially were acting as agents of the Jewish people who showed that they too desire Avoda Zara, and that's the same by the brick. Hachanami here also, Yisrael shazakaf levena, when the Jew stands up the brick, Galia daite denichale b'avodas kochavim, he's showing that Avodas Kochavim, Avoda Zara, is pleasing to him. V'chiyasa Oved Kochavim upalach lo, and when the Oved Kochavim comes and worships it, shlichusa didei kavid, he's doing the agency of the Jew in that situation. The Gemara continues and asks, "V'dilma be'egel hu denichaluhu, b'mide acharina lo." But maybe even by the egel hazav, maybe the Jews wanted to worship the egel. Who says they wanted to worship other avodah zaras? To that, the Gemara says, "No." Amar Kra, the pasuk says, "Eila Elohecha Yisrael," and that pasuk of Eila Elohecha Yisrael, malamin sheivu la'luos harbe, shows they desired many gods, they desired many idols, and therefore, again, we see it's not just the egel. Again, the ovdei kochavim in Eretz Yisrael were acting as their agents. The Gemara says, "Well, ema called devahadi egel nitzru." We should say any type of worship that happened at the exact same time as the egel. If that kind of worship happened in Eretz Yisrael, so that should be prohibited. Mikan va'ilach. But if there was something worshipped after that, after Klal Yisrael did teshuvah, nishtri, at least that should be permitted. And to that, the Gemara says, "Man mukach." Well, who's going to be able to prove it? Who can identify which were worshipped at which times? And that's why they are all prohibited. And we will take a look at two of the Rashis. V'imi shum asherus demeikar. If the issue is that they were Asherah trees earlier, hayu kodem shenitnu li Avram, maybe they were there before the land was given to Avram. V'lo yadin heininu, we don't know which those are. So michti avodas kocham shel oved kochavim bebittel sagila, but still there's a concept of nullification. V'kaimel an oved kochavim mevatel avodas kochavim al karcho. We've established that an oved kochavim, we're able to force him to be mevatel the avodah zara. Lichfinu lovdei kochavim v'levatlinu. So let's just force the ovdei kochavim and they'll be mevatel. And again, the Gemara went on to say that it works through the concept of shlichus, the concept of agency. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Avodas Kochavim Sheinichua Ovdeh. If you have an Avodah Zara that was abandoned by its worshippers, B'shas Shalom, if it's a time of peace, and the idea is they just abandoned it, they didn't take it with them, so then Muteres, that Avodah Zara becomes mutter. The assumption is that is a bittul, that is a nullification. But B'shas Milchama, but if it's a time of war, and so they were forced to abandon the Avodah Zara, but they may return to it later, Asura, then it is forbidden, it is prohibited. And the Mishnah continues, Bimusios shel malachim, if you have the platforms of kings, we'll see Rashi in a moment, Hareilum mutaros, those are permitted. Mimnei shema'amidin osa b'shash ha'malachim ovrim, because they put the idol on there at the time that the king passes. Rashi explains, B'musiyos shel malachim avnei gozes ha'mesukanen b'derech mahalach hamelech. You had these platforms that were along the road that the king took. Uk'sha hamelech over moshiv and shama avodas kochavim. When the king would pass, they would put an idol on there, v'hu mishtachavil, and he would bow to it. And so we say that that's mutter because they put it up when the king is passing. Kilomar means to say because they have to stand it up at the time the king passes. It's not there to always have an avodah zara on there. It's just for when when the king comes, Elalo Sasha, it's just for that moment. Well, the Kamon Parach, the Gemara further on will ask, Misham Hachim Mutar, is that a reason to say that it's mutter? Bitmiya, that's going to be a question, because, again, even though they're not using it all the time, but it is used for Avodah Zara. And the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba Amar Rav. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba says, the Rav says, Beis Nimrod, the house of Nimrod. Rashi explains, Beis Nimrod is Migdal Shabonu Dor Haflaga. This is the tower that was built by the Dor Haflaga. La Avodas Kochavim was built for Avodah Zara. V'Nimrod Hayamelech Aleim. Nimrod was the king upon them. This is what's known as the Migdal Bavel. So there was a house over there, the house of Nimrod, and this was built for Avodah Zara. So the base Nimrod, Harehi Ka'avodas Kochavim Sheinichua Ovdeh B'Shas Shalom. It has the status of an Avodah Zara that was abandoned by its worshippers at a time of peace, Umutter, and it is permitted. And Ava Gavdechi Badrinu Rachman, and even though in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he spread them all out, Keshas Milchama Dami, so really that story in Parshas Noach, it sort of was like a war. But he boy Lamahader Hadar, but if they wanted to return, they could, and Midalo Hadar, from the fact that they did not return, Bitule Batla, that indicates that there was a nullification. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "B'musiyos shel malachim hareilim mutaros." Again, the platforms of kings are permitted. V'chim evneishem amidin osa b'shasha malachim over mutaron, from the fact that they put the idol there when the king walks by, that makes it mutar. Amar Rava bar bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rava bar bar Chana says that Rabbi Yochanan says, "Hachi kamar." This is what the Mishnah means to say. Evneishem amidin osan b'shasha malachim overin, because they put it up when the king passes. Umalachim manichin derech zu, but the kings will sometimes not go on this road. V'holchem b'derech acheres, and they'll take another road. And Rashi explains, they don't care about the idol that's there. Therefore, these platforms are not really considered to be serving the Avodah Zarah. They don't necessarily go on that path where there are platforms, and so therefore it's not considered to be Meshamshe Avodas Kochavim. That's why they are permitted. And the Gemara continues, Kiyasa Ula, when Ula came, Yosef Abimsa Pegima, he sat on a damaged platform, one of these platforms that was damaged. Amrle Rav Yehuda Ula, Rav Yehuda said to Ula, Rav Shmuel Da'amri Tarvayu, but Rav and Shmuel, they both say, Bimos Shanifkam, if you have a platform of Avodah Zarah that's damaged, Asr, it is prohibited. Ve'afil L'man Damar Ein Ovdin L'Shvarm, and even according to the one who says that the Ovdei Kochavim, they don't worship broken idols, Hani Mili Avodas Kochavim, that's referring to the Avodah Zarah itself, the Zila Beimilsa, because that's disgraceful. Lemiflach l'shvarim, to bow to broken idols. Aval hay lo ichbisle, but the fact that the platform's a little broken, so what's the issue over there? Rashi says lo ichbisle lo ovid kochavim minishbar. The ovid kochavim doesn't care if it's broken. The akati chazi lemoshav avodas kochavim. Still, you're able to put the avodah zara on that platform, and so therefore it should still be a problem. Amarle said to him, Man yohiv lon me'afar de Rav Shmuel, who will give us from the dust of Rav and Shmuel, umalinan einen, and will be able to fill our eyes, meaning even though you've quoted me the great Rav and Shmuel that this should be prohibited, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish damrin tarvayu, but Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, they both say, Bimus shenifkam, if you have a damaged platform, mutter, it is permitted. Ve'afilu laman damar ovdin l'shvarm, and even according to the one who says that they would worship broken idols, Hani mili avodas kochavim, that's by the avodah zara itself. To cave in the Polcha, since they've worshipped it in the past, Zila Beimilsa Levatula, it actually is disgraceful to nullify it. Avalhani Shakli Lahayu Maisu Bimasachrin, and when it comes to the platforms, they'll just take away this platform and they'll bring a different platform, and therefore it actually is permitted. And the Gemara continues, Tanya Kavasid Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish, we have a brisa like Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish that it's mutter. It says in the brisa, Bimus Shenifkam mutter, if you have a platform that's damaged, it is permitted. And in contrast, Mizbeach Shenifkam, if you have a Mizbeach that is damaged, Asr, that actually is forbidden, Achi Notates Rubo, unless most of it is damaged, the majority. And the Gemara says, Heichi Dami Bimus, Heichi Dami Mizbeach. What's the difference between a Bimus and a Mizbeach? How do you know which one is which? Rashi says, Mizbeach Shemakriven all of Zevach La'avodas Kochavim. A Mizbeach is something that you actually bring sacrifices to the Avodah Zara. And Rashi continues, Heichi Dami Bimus Minoya Dualon. Hey, have a Bimus Lamoshav. How do we know that this one is a platform to put the Avodah Zara on? Hey, have a Mizbeach, and which one is a Mizbeach? Shemakriven all of that they bring sacrifices on it, the Nifresh Minei, that one we should separate from. How do we identify the difference between a Bimus and a Mizbeach? Amar Rabbi Yaakov Baridi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yaakov Baridi says that Rabbi Yochanan says, Bimus Even Achas. A Bimus is all one stone. Mizbeach, but a Mizbeach, Avonim Harbe, that's made of many stones, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Dalid Amud Aleph.